Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker. Welcome to the show, y'all. You ever feel like when you've made it out of the fire, you start smelling smoke again? That's what this chapter is all about. Joe ain't bleeding no more, but that don't mean the danger's gone. Because sometimes the real ghost ain't the one with a pistol. It's the one that knows your secrets. The mural outside Black Crown Building Entertainment was finally finished. Joe stood in front of it, his hoodie on, he got his little cup of coffee, keep that black coffee, man. He's sipping on that junk, right? The spray painted on this mural was like the faces of all the kids that done lost their life to gang violence, surrounded by this towering figure, this big figure in the middle with these outstretched arms, part angel, part leader. A crown floated above his head. Joe hated it. He didn't feel like no angel, and he damn sure wasn't no king. Trayvon walked up on him, his backpack slung over his back, bandaged up knuckles and all this and that, and he said, "That painter did you justice, bro." Joe looked back at him, he said, "Man, now dude did me propaganda, man." Trayvon looked at him and smiled. It's the same thing these days, it ain't no big thing, right? But Joe looked back at him and said, "Any word on war, man? Has anybody heard anything? It's nothing, like he vanished into the wind. I don't know what's going on." "Yeah, but ghosts don't stay gone forever." He stared at the wall again, wondering what was that painter thinking and what would everybody else think about it, right? But anyway, the people that end up getting gone like war, he's like, they don't stay gone, especially when they got receipts. That night, Joe's burner phone started ringing. It was an unknown number. He answered. No voice, just a click. Then a voice. It was mechanical, like that AI stuff, all masked, right? And all it says is, "He's not dead." Joe froze and he's listening. He said, "Who?" And then it said, "War. He's not dead, but they got him." Who the hell is they? Same ones that want you dead. Same ones who fed your crew poison. Then the phone went silent. The line went just flat out dead. Joe laid in the bed, tossing and turning, trying to figure out what's going on. Didn't tell Trey about it. He didn't want him to know, and he didn't write it down. Joe stared at that Black Crown logo projected on the wall in his office. The crown looked different now. It looked like a target. But hey, that's the price of doing business. That next morning, Joe got up and he met Keely. That's the marketing girl. Don't forget the marketing guru. You know what I'm saying? She looked spooked. She asked him a question. She said, "You ever heard of a dude named Roman?" Joe shook his head like, "Nah, I don't even know who that is. I ain't never heard of it." She said, "Well," she handed him a flash drive, said, now you have. Said, on that flash drive, it was screenshots, surveillance, conversations, all under one name. Roman Marcus Pale. On paper, this dude was like a real type real estate mogul, venture capitalist, charity board member, all them type of thing. But in the streets, he was an old school Fed contractor turned underworld asset broker. Now see, y'all might not be familiar with that. That's one of the things I wanted to point out to y'all, right? See, you got people in the game that they like consigliaries, right? A consigliary is like the lawyer to the mob, you know what I'm saying? They know all the people, they know where all the bones is buried and all this thing, and they facilitate things in the underworld, you understand? It ain't what you think, it ain't what you see all the time, right? But his specialty was taking over gangs from the inside, funding them, getting the money, then flipping them into something that he could use for his own private agenda. Joe sat there and he's watching all of his stomach start turning. Old girl whispered to him. He'd been circling since Citywide. Watch it. Joe said, "Why?" She looked at him and she didn't even blink. She said, "Because you're too organized to ignore and too legit to let go." So he sat there and he looked at her. He couldn't understand exactly what was going on, but she wanted to let him know. Later that night, it was Officer War. He was tied to a chair. Somebody popped him good in his eye. Got him a black eye, got duct tape over his mouth, and the message said simply this: "Meet at the Roosevelt meat locker, alone, or he dies." Joe looked at the screen like, man, what do I do? He ain't got no options. He grabbed his Glock, burner, and then the thumb drive, and he got on down. Put that slipped the thumb drive, he slipped it into a sock. And then he left a note for Trey. If I don't make it back, take this drive to Keely. Don't look at it. Don't ask questions. Just drop it. Then vanish. He left the office without a goodbye. He met him at the Roosevelt meat locker. The old meat locker. Man, listen to me. You know when you go in one of them meat lockers, how it be cold, and you got them hooks all up and hanging and all this and that. You know what I'm saying? How they used to do in them mob movies. That's what he walked into. Chains was everywhere. It was rust all on the wall, mold. And then, of course, them old memories of bodies and the stories that he had heard growing up in the game and in the street. He started to look and visualize. Joe stepped in and got his hands up. He saw war. He screamed out. He said, man, what's going on? A light clicked on. And then he saw this table and it was this chair. And a man had on gray gloves was sitting there. It was Roman. He said, you punctual. I respect that. Joe looked at him. He said, where's my man? Dude looked back. He said, your man is safe for now. You some kind of fed? Roman's eyes sparkled. He said, nah, not exactly. Consider me more like a steward. I take things that don't belong to children and I give them back to me. Joe stepped closer to him, kind of closed the space, right? He said, this city ain't yours, man. Dude looked back at him. Roman looked at him. He said, it will be. And I'd rather you be on the payroll than on that wall outside your building. Joe pulled out his gun. Dude didn't even blink. That ain't how he get out. In the game that he's in and the lifestyle that he leads, he can't afford to show no weakness. So Roman, he looking at him, looking at the barrel. He said, I want you to think carefully while he tapping on the table. This trigger sends your little tech incubator straight into federal seizure. You incorporated too quick, Joe. Too loud. People watching. Joe paused and listened to him, and for a minute he said, you been watching? Roman nodded and said, yeah, since the hospital. Since the shot that missed. That was me too. I needed to see what you do after that. Joe got pissed. You killed my plan, though. Roman looked at him and said, no, I redirected it. You're a lion. But even lions wear collars when they want to live. Now listen to what he's saying, right? You'll allow yourself to be tamed in the game to survive it so you can eat. So Roman laid out his pitch to him. Deal or die, man. That's what it is. He said, you can keep Black Crown alive, but Roman wanted his people to guide destruction. He said they could use it to funnel the money, redirect the heat, and to get rid of rivals, right? Eliminate them. In exchange, Roman offered him legal protection, funding, and expansion. A full citywide rollout. Corporate gangsterism, if you want to call it that. You understand what I'm saying? Y'all listen to me now. Now Joe, he sat there, he listened. He waiting, thinking about it. And then he asked him, what happens if I say no? Dude looked back at him. He said, we released a video. Tapping on the screen just to get Joe's attention. It was war. War's on there, and he got him confessing. It was forced though. Blooded, beaten up, they banged him up. But this confession was claiming that Joe was the mastermind of a gang-wide murder ring. Killing off everybody. Anybody could get it. Of course, yeah, it was all fabricated. You know, Roman done made it up, but it was persuasive. Especially coming from a DEA agent. Joe stared at the floor. Then he looked back up at Roman. He said, you ever get choked with your own silk tie? Roman smiled at him and looked at him. He said, I love a rebel like you. Now, here we go. What Roman didn't know, the Glock that Joe was carrying, it wasn't just a prop. And the thumb drive in Joe's sock, it had everything. Stack's betrayal, Take's money trail, Roman's secret account numbers. Because see, Officer Ward, even while he was being tortured, had managed to send one last email. Joe stood up, walked slowly over towards Roman, pulled his gun out. He said, Roman, you ever read chess books? Dude raised his eyebrows, looking at him, right? Confused as about to what he's saying. So Joe hit him up with this. He said, look, only rookies think sacrificing the queen is a mistake. Sometimes you do it to corner the king. Bam! Joe shot the tap. Then he lunged toward Roman, pinned him to the wall, and he whispered to him, you don't own me. You don't own us. Joe pistol whipped him, pow! Popped him upside the head. Then he vanished into the cold night before Roman's backup could get there. War, they found him 2 days later, dumped in a hospital alleyway, beaten up, barely breathing, but he was still alive. They did a number on him, crushed him, broke a couple of kidneys. Trayvon, he had delivered the drive to Keely. The press got hold of it. Leaks flooded all over the internet. Roman's ties to the urban corruption, the secret takeovers of black-led street movements, the false flag attacks to justify surveillance. Joe did everything to make sure everything was out there. And Joe didn't speak on it though. He didn't make a statement. He just went quiet, stayed focused. But he built from there. And he made sure that he kept building. Now his end game was simple. Black crown. They pivoted. They flipped the game. Joe restructured it as a private education firm for former gang members so that he could help everybody get their digital skills up, get their legal hustles going, get their investment training done, everything. And then while they was there, Trayvon even taught the guys how to play chess. You know what I'm saying? Keely, she ran obstacle to make sure everything stayed straight. She was serious about the business, right? She didn't want anything to go wrong. And Miss Renee, she ran trauma workshops, trying to get people to work through all the things that they had been doing over the years to themselves and to each other and to their neighborhoods. It's a lot of work that goes into that, trying to get brothers to pull back and settle beefs that they had with people that they grew up with, was born on the same corner with, but ended up shooting at each other and trying to kill, and in some cases actually killing the people that they knew and grew up with. Out of beef that had been started, real or make-believe, it was real to them because the caskets were full to prove it. And Joe, he just watched. He made moves from the shadows because the more the city tried to bury him, the more they watered his roots. But make no mistake about it, the ghosts weren't gone. They were just waiting for their moment to rise again. They were doing all the things that you do in silence to ensure that they would be able to make a comeback, to ensure that this wasn't over. They had to make sure that. Now Joe, he was still breathing, but still building. But he knows what he's up against. Roman ain't the first to try and strangle a dream, and he won't be the last. There are other people still waiting in the wings. Big G's still out there somewhere. A mystery to a lot of people. Everybody's trying to figure out where he's at, what he's doing, what he's got going on. But they can't because he's a ghost now. Now Ward's in the hospital laid up and he's trying to reorganize things, get things back on track. And his supervisor is telling him that he don't want him back out there because he's been made. Everybody knows who he is. All of this stuff that's been leaked on the internet. Now Ward, because of all the other things that he had worked on, he had become a target. He had become a target. Even though he was free from his captors that had him kidnapped, even though he had survived that, his career was in jeopardy now. How was he going to be an asset when he couldn't move in the shadows? That was his specialty, moving in the shadows, trying to help Joe become the type of person that he wanted to do. It was continuing to grow. It was continuing to build. And the people were getting frustrated with a lot of the things, because a lot of times when you go on legal, things move slower than they do when you're in the streets. People want things to change overnight, and that's just not how it works. The younger ones, they were more patient than the older ones. The younger ones, they were content learning the game and trying to apply it to the hustle. They were content learning chess because Trayvon made sure to use chess as an analogy, a metaphor to real life. And they dug that. They liked that. They saw the vision. And that's what's going on with our younger people. It's hard to get them to see the vision. It's hard to get them to understand it's a long-term strategy. But that's what we're up against. But time is growing near for Joe. He's got to start making some more moves and at the same time make sure that he's protecting himself. It's not a game out here. It's not a game. Everybody's not playing fair. Everybody's not playing for keeps. And I'm telling you this, you got to understand how people move in the streets. Most of y'all think y'all know how people move in the streets. Excuse me. You don't really know how people move in the streets. You don't really know how devastating, how crooked, how manipulative, how backbiting it is. All in the name of survival. You got to be careful when you're out there, especially when you're going legit. See, because you don't hear a lot of those stories about somebody trying to break free and go legit and then try to get things together. What you do hear is they turned their life around, but what you don't hear is how they did it. How they did it. And if you want to continue to hear how Joe was able to break free the best way he knew how and help those around him and that next generation of kids, listen to me. You're going to have to tune in to the next episode, right? This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.